1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. I'm Rebecca Richards, and I'm the co-director of the Belmont Gallery of Art, together with Adine Storer. And we would like to welcome everybody to this evening's virtual reception for the BGA's Hope is the Thing with Feathers exhibit. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the Belmont High School Jazz Combo that we just heard from, and they're going to be performing several times throughout the course of the reception. And I'd like to just introduce them by name. We have two brothers, Aaron and Jacob Lebetsky. Aaron's on piano, Jacob's on trumpet, Owen Johnson is on saxophone, and Andrew Woodsu is on drums. So thank you. We're pleased to have them here this evening. We're going to talk a little bit about how this show came together with the help of our featured artist, Becky Holmes-Farley. But Adine has asked me to, before we get started, should I read the poem now?
Yes, please do.
So as most of you know, this show was actually inspired by Becky's photography, which we'll talk more about in just a moment, but also this very famous poem of Emily Dickinson's, which has a very personal connection for me. So I'm going to read it. Anyway, hope is the thing with feathers. Need my glasses. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never an extremity it asked a crumb of me. So this show is rooted in hope, and the BGA and the resilience of the human spirit, which is really what that poem is about. And Adine and I decided early on when we Adine created the virtual gallery that we wanted to present a series of shows that would really sort of enrich the human connection we have to one another, and also, again, reiterate the issue of resilience during the last very difficult year that we've all lived through. So thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn things over to Adine Storer, my co-director.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you here tonight at these virtual receptions. Rebecca, were you going to say something?
Oh, you were frozen for just a second, but we're okay.
It's nice to see everybody. I want to introduce our featured artist, Becky Holmes-Farley, who is an Arlington photographer and whose work has been in the gallery over the years. But she inspired this show. And so now she is going to speak about her work.
So first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I came to do art, because I came by this in sort of a really non-traditional way. I'm really a book learner, follow the rules, color inside the lines kind of person. And I came to this later in life. And when Adine and Rebecca asked me to speak tonight, my first thought was panic. What am I going to say to all of these artists who are schooled and have done this all their lives that they'll find interesting? But then as I was thinking about it today, I thought, well, I have three things that I actually can share. And one is how I've sort of learned that the potential one has can be changed, and especially with warm and caring encouragement by people. And BGA has been my home and has encouraged me, along with Art Links Arlington. And I think but for those people in my life, I wouldn't be here talking tonight. The second thing I'm going to talk a little bit about is the technical use of Photoshop, which you'll notice in most of my images I've used to perfect and enhance and change them. And it'll be a limited discussion, and you'll see a little bit why that is when I get to that part. And then I'm going to leave you at the end with a sort of a philosophical thought I have about how we perceive certain kinds of art, and just something for you to chew on. So how did I get here? As I said, I think people have different potentials, and when certain life events come and hit you, you may or may not develop a certain potential into being. And I sort of have an art analogy for this. So if you imagine a bucket of paint, you get your brush in and you pick it up and you flick it at the wall, or you're going to get all kinds of dots, and some of them are going to be big and they're going to start running down the wall. And those are things like talent that cannot be denied. That you're meant to do that, you're going to do that, there's no denying it. Then there are littler dots, medium dots, littler dots that may or may not come to be anything, and it just depends on whether or not certain things happen. The wind blows a certain way, a dot above you comes and interacts with your life and pushes you to make a mark. And I think I'm one of those littler dots. And so I could spend probably an hour telling you all the things that converged in my life to turn this lawyer, ethicist, public health person into an artist today. But we don't have that long. So I'm going to talk about it's just my birds. And obviously what sort of started me on the bird kick is the pandemic, that we're trapped at home. I, like everyone else, and I love the outdoors, and I love psychology and animal behavior. And so I spent a lot of time wrapping myself up in my coat and going outside and looking out the window. and studying the birds around me. And I did that as sort of the basis for my photographs. And so they aren't just random, the underlying images that I took aren't just sort of random shots that I came across something in the woods. I know these birds. I know that this cardinal pair takes their bath in the pond every day at 4 o'clock, and that when the sun is right, it's very beautiful. I know that the goldfinch hides under the leaves of the apple tree when it's raining. You know, I know that one of the cardinals has like a marred beak. I don't know how it happened, but he's kind of shunned. And there's, you know, there's some that have bad feathers or a bad, you know, fungus eye or whatever. So I know these little bees and studied them and went best to like get their little personalities. And so the technical piece, I take the images and then I look at how I want to change them and enhance them. And virtually without exception, I find I can improve upon the initial thing that I took. I'm reasonably good at kind of crafting out a frame and the light piece, but they're often, you know, you've got a perfect picture, but there's a branch bisecting the neck of the animal or something, you know, and so I have learned through Photoshop how I can remove those things. And even more than that, as I've experienced it, I've learned how I can change the texture, the color, the saturation of things, the brightness, the dimness, even stretching canvas or changing perspective. But I wish I could tell everyone, because people frequently ask me exactly how do you do that. I have absolutely no idea, because I bought a book and I put it on the chair and it sat there staring at me. And it actually made doing photography not fun, because I kept feeling as if I ought to be reading the book and then I could do it well. And then I remembered what a great piano teacher who came to our home said to the kids when she first started with them. She said, not going to teach you how to read notes because you'll get bogged down and you'll drop it. I'm going to teach you how to love music. I'm going to have you listen to it, and then I'm going to have you learn to play by ear, and you will get to the point where you play things that satisfy you. You know, you're not bogged down doing Twinkle Twinkle. You're playing something that you really, really like. And at that point, you will want to do the work to learn the notes. And so I've kind of gone with that philosophy and so done trial and error and a lot of instinct in what I've done with Photoshop. And I don't know what role instinct plays or whether, you know, that's an artistic thing. I was watching Schitt's Creek the other night. I don't know how many people watch that, but they're two guys who are running an apothecary, and they started having a discussion about whether the toilet brushes might sell better if they were sitting up in the front of the store. And David's like, no, it's just not right. And I'm thinking to myself, it's not right. I mean, it's not in a book though. It's nowhere in a book. It's just sort of instinctive that if you want people to come into your shop, you got to put the toilet brushes right in front. And so that's sort of how I approach things. So I wanted to pull out at least one of the pieces that I've worked on. And Adine, maybe you can show the joyful abject joy. This is a bird that's sort of on a white background that's, you don't see any of the details of it, and it's jumping off a branch. There you go.
Yay!
So what would have been really, really helpful if I could have found the original to this. And sadly, my organizational skills with my photography are not very good. And I tried to look today and I couldn't come up with it. But I can tell you that I think it was a finch, a house finch, which is brown and red, and that it was in focus and that there were branches in the background. So I took this image probably because it was leaping, I don't remember. And I looked at it, and to be honest, I didn't really like it that much, except for the movement. And that kind of spoke to me, but I didn't like the rest of it. So this is one of the pieces where in my mind, I didn't conceive exactly this, but I knew the things I wanted to do. I wanted to take away the detail because that wasn't relevant to the feeling that I wanted to evoke. I definitely wanted to change the color, and I didn't want the flight distracted by a lot of stuff in the background. So Photoshop and monkeying around with it enabled me to get to this place. I did those things. I took things out and I changed the color. First, I actually started with a lighter blue. I thought I wanted sort of the soft flight look, and then it didn't have enough punch for me. So you can do those things in Photoshop. And I did. And I did want to mention there's actually not just Photoshop anymore. There is something called Topaz that I've only started to learn. And there are a couple of my pieces in the show. It isn't important to pull them up, but that have used that, and you might take a look at them. There are a couple of seagulls on a beach that I wanted to have like sort of a dreamy effect. Oh, actually, it's not them.
Oh, not that one. Oh, well.
Yeah, no, I can see why. Yeah, I should have described it better. There are two that are sort of playing, and they have a dreamy look and kind of a swirly effect to them. And you can do that in Topaz. And Ethereal Flight, which is there you go, is a red belly taking off out of a tree that I have in my backyard. And it was just too much gobbledygook. I mean, I had the form of the bird in flight and you could see the red head, but the rest of it was there was just too much. And so I decided what I wanted was sort of an airy feeling. And so I worked with Photoshop to make that happen in both the background and the foreground. So the tools in Photoshop that I mostly use are changing the saturation and tone and color, lightening, brightening, and using filters that they have. I don't just use a filter, they have the one that says watercolor, and you can put that on a piece, but it's not really going to look that great. I tend to use that and then take individual brushes to refine and do things that I want to. And there are all kinds of different heads you can get for that. There's some that can make something look like hair, and there's just a huge variety of things. I spent ages learning how to take things off a page, and then I found the spot healer brush, which will do it really quickly for you because it borrows pixels from nearby and fills them in. So I recommend it. I can get lost and I can easily sit for 4 hours trying to create, something that I have in my head and trying to make a picture. So then the last thing I'll say is kind of a thought I've had about valuing artistic output and sort of this new field that we have with Photoshop. I've had a lot of people who are good artists, went to school and everything, and come up and say, not so much about the birds, but some of my other pieces, and say, I love it. Like, what medium are you using? Because you can tell they're trying to figure out, like, how did you get that effect? And they think I've somehow painted it. I'll say, well, actually, it's a photograph, and I did it in Photoshop. And the eyes kind of, half and half. Half of the people, are really interested, and I tell them a little bit more, and the other half kind of glaze over, and I feel like the respect is kind of gone. And I just want to put a plug in for this kind of art, because I think that reflects a misunderstanding, about how much effort is involved and how much you bring to it as an artist. It's not just pushing buttons. It's changing it to fit what's in your mind, and it does take a lot of time. And there is art involved. And the second thing that has occurred to me is that if you're getting a result that you like, if you've come up to somebody and you like their end result, why is it different to find out that it was done on a computer versus with a paintbrush? Because digital work, it's just, you're learning how to move pixels and everything. Isn't art just in the way learning to use your paintbrushes or putting collage together? And so I think we need to adapt a little bit, and I just wanted to put a plug in for that. So that's how I did my pieces, and I've really just enjoyed the experience, and I was honored to get to ask to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Becky. That was just wonderful. And thank you for the plug for digital art. You described it beautifully, and absolutely. I mean, what you do to transform, to the work you put into learning your subjects and thinking about how to photograph them and then how to transform them. Each of those things is an art. So thank you so much. I'm inspired. I would get my camera back out again. Rebecca, are we going to do some music now?
We might have a programming change here. Do you think we should have the musical interlude or keep going with the artists? I just, we could have a little musical interlude. I mean, it's whatever, you know.
I think we should do a musical interlude.
Yeah,
We've
okay.
got the Belmont High School kids here, and they're fabulous. And
yeah,
seize
Let's
the
give
day.
the kids some attention. They're so good.
Yeah. All right. So
and their Porch Fest t-shirts, or at least somebody has a Porch Fest t-shirt.
yeah. Okay. So here we go with our BHS jazz combo. They're going to perform a couple of jazz standards.
Hopefully.
Are they?
One,
Okay.
2, 3, 4.
Thank
That was,
you.
that was Bessie's Blues by John Coltrane.
Yes, thank you.
So I think that, first of all, Becky, thank you very much. That was very informative. And I think actually it was really a terrific talk.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, we should introduce, we have invited a group of artists from the show who are working in different mediums that we thought would be a good way to sort of show the scope in some ways of the art that's included in the exhibit. And the first person that we'd like to speak for a few minutes is Glenn Rifkin. And Glenn is going to talk a little bit about his own background, but we thought he would be interesting to follow Becky because he's very much a bird photographer. And I think he takes a very different approach to his photography, to making his art, but we're going to let him speak for himself. So Glenn will be followed by another group of, I think, all women artists from the show. And then we'll have another musical interlude, and then we're going to open it up for Q&As, and if some other artists want to talk briefly about their work and so on. So Glenn, are you ready to chat for a few minutes?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
As background, I'm actually a journalist and an author. I've been a contributor to the New York Times for over 30 years, written a lot of books about business. Oddly and strangely, the last few years, I've been writing a lot of obituaries for the New York Times, and that's a whole other story for another show. But along the way, I've been a photographer as well. I actually was a part-time major in photography and photojournalism 45 years ago at Boston University. One of my classmates was Pete Souza, who went on to become Obama's White House photographer. So kind of a cool connection. Over the years, however, I, have practiced all sorts of different kinds of photography. And I'd say the last couple of decades, I focused more and more on nature photography. And my sense of why I'm out there is just an immersion in the beautiful world that we live in. And certainly over the pandemic, as Becky was talking about, the idea of getting out of your house without a mask on and just being able to wander and seeing what's out there in this. In fact, I don't know how many have noticed it, but I think a lot of people noticed that without the traffic and the cars and the airplanes, nature rebounded in an astounding way. I found the birds and the presence of birds at a level I had never seen before. So it was really stimulating, and in terms of the word hope, given how hopeless a lot of us were feeling during the pandemic for not only health reasons, but for political reasons and all the crazy things going on in this country, the idea for me to get out into nature and just have me and my camera, often my dog would accompany me, it was kind of life-saving in a lot of ways. And so from the perspective of my bird photography, as I said, I really do a lot of nature photography in general. I started to think much more and take a lot more photos of birds in the last few years. And I would say that in the last 12 months, something really dramatic changed for me. And what that was I purchased a 600 millimeter zoom lens. And it really literally changed the world of birds for me. I was able to get close up and startlingly, amazingly sharp images that I had not been able to get with even a 300 millimeter lens. So it was a catalyst for me to just want to do this more and more. And I found myself literally out there every morning. I live in Acton, Massachusetts, and I have access to some wonderful places where there are great birds year round, but certainly in the spring during the migration, it's astounding to see the number of birds that just show up in a place like Acton, of all things. One of my favorite places to photograph is Great Meadows. It's a national wildlife preserve in Concord. And I'm guessing those who are here attending this show probably have some affinity for birds. And if you do, you've probably been there. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful place to wander. The photo that you're looking at is nothing more than a common grackle, which, we would often just dismiss as a kind of a blackbird that makes a funny noise and would probably be more annoying than anything else. Turns out, and I didn't even realize this till I looked at this photograph, that grackles have this iridescent blue necklace that they wear around their heads and their necks. And I took this shot. The sun it was an early morning shot. And so the sun was in a perfect position to capture this moment, which just kind of blew me away. And it became one of my favorite shots from the past year. And I just thought it would be a nice addition to the show. You get the sharp image of the bird. This bird was sitting among the reeds. If you do the main trail in Great Meadows, you walk this very long trail, and on both sides, there are reeds and marshes, and then it all goes out to the water. And this guy was just sitting there, and he was basically showing off for me. I got, I think, 2 or 3 shots, and then he flew away. And when I saw this one, I said, this was just a special moment. The light needed to be just right. And there it was. Adine, if you would switch to the swan. So this was also at Great Meadows. It was actually July 4th, and I was wandering along. And if any of you were out there last summer, the place was kind of taken over by Canada geese. And they're kind of nasty birds, and they're fearless. So they were covering the trail and actually were driving some people away who were afraid to even try to get through them. And I was wandering back through the Canada geese, figuring, bring it on. And I looked over, and there was a mute swan, and it had just come out of the water, that gray sort of with what looks like marks on my picture. That's the water. And the mute swan was just sitting there alone, and it started to preen. And I had this beautiful new lens, and I said, this is a moment, because the swans don't normally get this close. They're usually way out on the water, and you have to just hope that you can capture something. This swan started moving its neck around, and when I saw what it was doing, I just kept snapping. I have a kind of a motor drive, built-in function on my camera, and I just kept snapping away. And again, when I got home and just started going through the images, this just jumped off the screen to me. This was what I call the money shot. And if you're a bird photographer, you know what I'm talking about. You can take 50 pictures, but if you get that one perfect image that you may have been looking for, you may not have been looking for, but this one, I had no idea. It looks as if the swan is just in repose. It looks like it's sort of napping with its head on its back. It was just kind of itching its back with its head. And I got the moment. And I just thought, I have a lot of pictures of this swan, but this was the one that jumped out at me. It sort of symbolizes for the kind of work that I like to do. Becky was talking about using Photoshop. I use a version of Photoshop called Lightroom. It's sort of Photoshop Light. And I'm a little more of a purist in terms of what I'm willing to do to a picture and what I won't. And so I will crop an image. I will happily crop an image to get something more dramatic. I will work on the exposure and, lighten up, darken, add contrast, that type of thing. I don't generally want to do anything more than that, though. I don't want to put filters on that will, make it look like something else. Because to me, one of the lures of this hobby that I have is just the incredible beauty of birds, the diversity and the beauty, and these are just birds that we have access to here. If I'm inevitably on Facebook more than I should be, and the nature photography from around the world, the thousands of species of birds and the colors, they're just breathtaking on so many levels. So this is the kind of picture I would, try to get. It's hard to get, and I don't get it that often, but I thought this was a one that might be a nice addition to the show.
Indeed.
Yes, it's wonderful.
If you could put up that last one, the great blue
what?
heron. I won't take much longer with this, but
This is fascinating.
I've expanded my photography. The camera goes with me wherever I go, and it's a heavy thing to schlep around, believe me. And yet, I feel now like if I don't have it and I see a bird that I want, I will just regret it for the rest of my life. So I bring it along. And this was a trip to South Carolina, to Charleston, and we went out to one of the plantations that's about an hour away from Charleston. And we were just going to do a visit to the plantation to see what that experience was like. And along the way, there was an Audubon sanctuary, which was essentially in the swamp. And I said, oh, we're stopping, and pulled out the camera. We wandered around across this bridge and around this turn. It was very isolated, and there were only a couple of people there. And we came around this turn, and there was the most amazing sight. It was a rookery. And not just a rookery for great blue herons. There were all sorts of beautiful ibises and other water birds that were there. There were crocodiles or alligators. I'm sorry, wrong animal. Lots of turtles, egrets, and great white herons. And I just was blown away. So needless to say, I started to take pictures. What this picture, many people have said to me, it looks like a painting. And I think the effect comes from the fact that I had to lighten the image in order to get the beauty of the great blue heron that you're seeing. And when I did lighten it, it lightened the sky. And it was a kind of an overcast day anyway. So by lightening the sky this way, the image itself is just stark. And really the only color is the beak. And it just, again, to me, this was the money shot. I have a lot of nice shots from this day, but I just felt like this gave this sense of the majesty of the great blue heron, a bird that we have everywhere. They're here, they're all over the country, they're in the South. And I just never tire of taking pictures of them. If I see one, I can't say, yes, I have 1,000 images of the great blue heron. I'm going to keep going. And so this was one that just jumped out at me. I literally have taken thousands of bird photos. The last year has been stunning in its breadth for me. And I don't think of myself as an artist. I think of myself as just a nature lover who has, wanted to capture this kind of beauty. And I think in this beauty, there is hope. And so that's why I love the theme of this show. And I'm honored to be part of it. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was wonderful. So Adine, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I can.
So should we now, Julia B. So
Like Julia Bezgacheva?
yes, Julia, would
Hey,
you
are
like
you
to
there?
chat for a few minutes?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Julia Bezgacheva, or really just Julia B. That's how everyone calls me. Anyway, I'm originally from Siberia, but I've been living in Arlington, Virginia for the last 20 years. And to get it out of the way, yes, it is cold in Siberia in the winter. We can get it's what everyone asks anyway. So we can get about -40 degrees in the winter, but it's in the middle of the continent. So summers are really hot. We get above 100 degrees for a few weeks in July. Yeah, so we get, yeah, I see I didn't making faces. So we get all of it. And I'm a mathematician and data scientist. Just started painting about 4 years ago. I love it. I tried a few different mediums, and then I tried soft pastel, and that was a love from the first sight. I really, really like the medium. That medium been around for quite some time, and we have pastels from 17th or 18th century, which are as luminous and as brilliant as they were when they were painted. And basically soft pastel, it's just a pigment rolled in a stick with a little bit of a binder. I have some, have some to show you still. And it's very tactile medium and very direct. So you're not gonna have any brushes. You're just gonna have your stick and you're gonna put it on paper like this. And, I'm not sure whether my camera is behaving very well, but that's where you get all the luminosity, and you can get both effect of a drawing with the line drawing and effect of a painting when you work with the side of a stick. And it's a big debate whether it's drawing or painting, and in different exhibitions, it's put into different categories. So as all of us last year, we were spending a lot of time at home, and I have a bird feeder outside of my window in the room where I work. And it's really very close to what Becky was saying. I got to know all the birds that are coming now when I'm at home during the day. I got to know their personalities, and we can actually switch to the slides now. So I know that cardinal, he's a cardinal bird, he's a patriarch of the family. And he is extremely territorial.
You can, I think you can see that, yes.
Yes. So I know, I mean, I know him when I see him a few blocks away from my house because he has huge personality. And yes, and so it was a new experience, right? To get to know all of them, to recognize their faces, the personalities, what they do. There were also, while we're living here, quite a few discoveries right here on my own deck. So we've been living here for about 6 years, and that summer we had a sunflower on our deck, probably a seed from a bird feeder came down and we got a sunflower. And suddenly we got a goldfinch. So it's also an image in the show. So we've been here in that same house for 6 years. I had no idea we have goldfinches around. And I guess there were no sunflowers on the deck, so they were not just that interested. So you can make all those little discoveries right here next to your living room. And you know, if you care to step 10 or 15 minutes away from your house, you can learn even more about nature around you and all this. So, and as I said, pastel is a very tactile medium. So I really love it for painting birds or animals, it really gives it that sense of almost touching those soft feathers. The 3 paintings that are in, and I'm calling them paintings right now because it's more about color and not really a line making the most in here. They are probably going to be a part of a bigger series. And the names in the show are just green, yellow, and red. And really often we just say, oh, look at this yellow bird. Especially I hear it when moms with kids are walking by and it's just a red bird or a yellow bird or, you know, blue bird, something like that. And we just refer to birds by their color, but there is much, much more to learn about them. And just as individual personalities, but also the species we are sharing this world with. So these 3 works, and there is the blue one behind me on my screen. They will probably be part of a bit of a bigger series, which I'll hope to be displayed in one of the local elementary schools. So it will still say green, red, blue, but there will be a bit more of an explanation and things to learn about all those birds. So that's
Thank you. And I just want to mention that it's wonderful that both Glenn and Julia are new artists for the BGA. And one thing that's wonderful is Julia mentioned where she lives. So she doesn't live in New England. And so the virtual gallery has allowed us to showcase the work of people from all over the country, which has really been wonderful. So
absolutely. And it allows me to learn more of the artists there.
Yes, thank you.
But it was interesting when Becky was saying that she lives in Arlington. I'm also in Arlington, but Virginia.
Yeah, Arlington, Mass, right? Right, exactly, right. So thank you very much. And there's going to be, you know, time, we hope some time for Q&A. So I think we will now invite Leah Kalidis to talk about her work. And I know birds are actually an important part of her art. And so Leah, would you like to speak a little bit about your work and your background and so on?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Thanks, Rebecca. Great. I can just say while you're getting that set up that ages ago, it seems, I attended Massachusetts College of Art in Boston. I studied art history and and painting. And now I live with my family, my 2 kids, my husband, and our pet frog in Newton, Massachusetts. That was an animal we acquired during the pandemic. we picked up a tadpole, and anyway, that's another story. So I just wanted to thank Rebecca and Adine for inviting me to this show. Of course, I love the theme because so much of my art includes birds. And I've had a fondness for birds for so long. Picking out pieces for this show made me think back to where my interest in birds started. And actually, when I was a kid, I had this little book of North American birds on the bookshelf, and I used to take it outside with my little kid-sized lawn chair and set up by the bird feeder and sit very quiet and still. And then when a bird would come, I would look it up in the book quietly. So I guess my interest in birds goes way back. But now in my artwork, I think I'm drawn to them as symbols, partly because they're so beautiful and strong and delicate. So they're both very delicate and fragile and also strong. And so that makes me think of the female form in some ways, which I also draw and paint a lot of women. But it also constantly makes me think of resilience, of people and life, and also the cycles of life. You see birds doing different things at different times of year. They're gathering things to make a nest, and then they're migrating away. So when I see birds, I'm often thinking about those cycles of life that are happening. And so when birds appear in my art, I'm often thinking of, what messages are they bringing to me? In my artwork, I usually work intuitively, which means that I will start to paint and collage, not necessarily knowing where an image is going. And I do this partly so that I can process feelings that I'm having or experiences or whatnot. And in the case of Lady of the Lake, I was transferring images onto a canvas and collaging and painting. And the face, you can see there's some birds in it. But what happened was I transferred an image of birds, and it happened to be in the shape of a face. It was one of those happy accidents that happen in a lot of my art. So I kind of just followed that. And a lot of my art is kind of a journey. I'm just going along for the ride a little bit. And as I painted her out, there was a bit of gel in her arm that looked like the shape of a feather. And I thought, well, that would be interesting as a tattoo. And so I drew that out, and it kept going along. And it wasn't until a little bit after I finished the piece that I realized what I was processing. I realized that the woman looked strikingly like my cousin, who had passed away at an early age, and just a couple years prior. And I realized I was processing that, So if you could bring up Chats at Dusk next. And
Which okay, sorry.
it's the woman who is speaking to the bird. I don't know if you have that one.
There you go.
There you go. Yes. This was also done intuitively, where I was just putting paint down on the canvas, and what came to me was an image of a woman holding a bird. And what I like about this piece is that I'm often thinking about birds as messengers, and this bird is literally speaking night. And it also speaks to how I think of birds as a reminder of those life cycles and cycles of nature. And so the bird here is speaking about what's about to come, what's coming next, which is nighttime. And then if you could bring up Holding On, which is the image
With the red and the
the bird, yes. In this one, I'm also exploring cycles of life, and this was intuitively made as well. And as I was creating it, I realized that in this piece, I was exploring the idea of, the woman is holding the bird, but not so tight that the bird can't open its wings. And in terms of cycles of life, I'm in this part of life right now where my kids are 6 and 10, and I'm both holding on to them close, but also not so tight that they can't reach their wings out and start to become more independent. So it's just another case where a bird is a reminder of that sort of life cycle. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of why birds keep coming up in my art, what they mean to me, and a little glimpse in my process, I think. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. So Nancy Krasko is somewhere out there. Nancy she's a textile artist, fiber artist. And Nancy, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Nancy's been in a number of shows at the BGA and many other places as well. And we would like Nancy to talk a little bit about her work in the show. And Nancy has also, in prior shows, that Adine and I have curated together with help from Richard, who's here. Birds have also appeared in some of her other work outside of this exhibit. So welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Rebecca and Adine, for inviting me to speak tonight. It's always a pleasure to share my work. I live and work out of a studio in my house in Brighton, Massachusetts. And I attended the Rhode Island School of Design and studied painting, and I got a degree in art education. And I worked for 30 years in art education, teaching art. Predominantly, most of my time was spent in the Arlington Public Schools in the middle schools there. I started as a traditional quilt maker in about 1968 when my children were small, and it was just too much with them wandering around to have turpentine and oil paints. And so I said, I'll make a quilt, and I haven't stopped since. But my quilt making has changed quite a bit with the addition of printmaking and the study of Asian textiles. I studied Asian textiles with a Korean artist called Chung-Gi Lee at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in 1998. And I started using silk organza and making layers so that the translucency of the silk allowed me to build up layers. And then if I'm lucky, and certainly this has been true in the BGA, that I've been able to hang them so that the air gets behind them and you can actually see both sides. And what Becky said really resonated with me too about digital art. People kind of discounting it or respecting it. And I think that happens with fiber too. So I'm always very grateful to galleries that show fiber as part of an exhibit. The second workshop that I studied was gelatin plate printmaking, which I had never done. I did etching and wood carving and linoleum block printing, but I'd never used a gelatin plate before. It was about 2010, maybe. I went to Haystack again and studied with Susan Webster, and that kind of revolutionized my silk work. So if you want to put up the blue piece, Adine, I'll talk about that a little. Yeah, I can talk about that one first. This is 2 layers of silk organza. And it doesn't actually have any birds in it. It has quite a few feathers. And a friend of mine gave me scraps of her, that she had cut off the ends, like the selvages of the fabric. And they were all packaged in neat little plastic bags by color. And so I took them out of the bags and put them out on my desk, and I said, on my work table, and I said, oh, those look like nests. So this piece is called Available Real Estate. So it's, and I have a small collection of nests. I love birds, and I walk along the Charles River every week, a couple of times a week, and I see empty nests on the ground. Sometimes I pick them up. And I also have a bird bath in the front yard, which takes a great deal of maintenance, especially now. You have to clean it and fill it up every day, but I do get a lot of birds. And I was very excited the other day to see a goldfinch here in the city. I see them along the river, but I hadn't seen them around my house. So I think the pandemic has let them explore their normal habitats a little bit further afield. Okay, the next one.
That's the next
That
one.
or whichever one. There's
I can,
another one, yeah. Whichever three you want.
okay, so is this one good? I can go back?
Yeah, I can't, this is the nest, this is the same one.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's gone and paused again. Hold on, I will restart the share. I need more experience.
Yeah, there must be a way to take it off pause, but
Yeah, it's strange.
so this is called Flying Off the Grid. And again, it doesn't have any actual birds in it. It has bird form. I did a whole series of these called, well, this one's Flying Off the Grid. I did Sailing Off the Grid, Growing Off the Grid, Wandering Off the Grid. Each one had a grid in the center, and then the theme went out from there. There are feathers, those little spotted feathers, and larger ones. And I discovered a very interesting thing about feathers while I was working on these pieces. Normally I hand quilt, and so I was hand quilting around the feathers. But then I found out I actually had to machine quilt these because the feathers at the end of the quill were able to escape through little tiny hand stitches. But where the machine stitches are on both sides of the quilt and not just a running stitch, it contained them. So I was absolutely amazed to come back the next day or two and find that the feather had worked its way out of the space that I had confined it to. It was really interesting.
Irrepressible.
And the last one, yeah.
Coming.
This is part of a series about endangered species. We were up at Crane Beach, and I saw these restricted area signs where the piping plovers are protected and you can't go into the dunes or in the beach. So I made some linoleum prints of piping plovers. There are actually three blocks on these, and I just overlapped them and reversed them by printing them on the opposite side of the fabric. And then I did the little sand areas in gelatin print, and then I machine stitched the wire fence because so many times you see a fenced area where you can't go in. So I really like this piece, and especially because Crane Beach is near and dear to my heart, and it does provide a good breeding area for the piping plovers.
Wonderful.
I am working, I do, as I said, I do a lot of thinking about birds, and it wasn't until I saw the call for this show that I realized that I had so many pieces about birds. And in fact, right now I'm working on one because I read an article in the paper last week or the week before about the city of Philadelphia dimming their lights at night in order to prevent the birds from crashing into the buildings and falling to the ground and dying. They navigate at night by the stars, and when the buildings are brightly lit, they lose their sense of direction. So that's going to be my next piece. You can look for that.
We'll look forward to that one. Nancy, thank you. That was really informative. And so we have another artist, Joanna Dunn, who has been, she has shown work in the BGA also for a number of years. She's going to talk a little bit about her background, but she works in, lots of different media. And more recently, she's been working primarily as a sculptor, right? I mean, she's going to talk about that. And we have one more artist, I believe. We're going to see if Sharon Witham will chat for a minute, and then we'll open it up to some questions and answers in the next few minutes. So Joanna, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I've been in the shows, the past couple of virtual shows, but I've always had to miss the opening nights. And I'm so glad to attend this one. It's been so amazing to hear all the artists speak so far. So on my little shoulder is perched a little friend. He's actually the first crow that I made. And he's made out of materials you can probably find in your recycling bin. He's literally made out of newspaper, tape, and literally like the oldest, gooeyest house paint that I wanted to throw away, but like you can't throw away toxic materials and things. Like I had this can of house paint that had basically congealed. It was so sticky. It was almost like, I don't know, like chewing gum or something, but I was able to paint these crows. And a friend and I had a little gallery exhibit out in Western Mass, and we made an installation with crows on a ladder and all these kind of arboreal things. And for both my friend and I, who run a summer program together, she lives in the woods, and crows have become this bird that we're just always observing. I love how they look in the winter, in the snow. I love watching them socially call to each other. And then I love the look of a solitary crow on a branch. I mean, they're just so captivating. So anyways, I made this guy, and we made about 10 crows like this together. The cardboard, his wings are made of cardboard, but his body's made of newspaper. So we had made a bunch of these crows, but I'd also been working in clay, really making pottery, but I was getting into sculpture. I'd made some portrait busts, and I just started to think like, oh, I want to make like crows out of real materials. So Adine, if you start my first slide, or I can also present if that's easier. Okay, so here's my, this was actually the second crow that I ever worked on in, it's called T1 stoneware. It's a very high grit sculpture stoneware, and it fires at cone 10. I've been firing out of Harvard Ceramics Studio because they allow you to use they have really big kilns. You can make sculptural forms of any size. There's no limits there. This is actually the back view of that crow. I don't know if you have the front view.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go.
I kind of got into the base on these crows too. So it was actually after my friend and I had made these cardboard crows, and then before I made these clay crows, that I actually went to England literally just as COVID was, you were still able to fly. This was late February last year. I went to England. I visited the Tower of London. I saw the ravens, and it was like, they were just such characters. I don't know if anyone in the audience has been to the Tower of London and seen those ravens, but it's like you fall in love with them. They're such characters. And so it was definitely in London that I was like, I'm going to go home and make some clay ravens or crows. And I wasn't interested so much in making them like crows, like from an ornithology book. Like they didn't have to be exactly anatomically correct. I kind of wanted to go with the spirit and character of the bird. So that's what you see. I'm really playing with clay, and I'm not really worrying about, looking at bird anatomy. I'm kind of trying to make a character. So I just had fun with the claws. I was making them kind of from memory. Anyways, my next thing that I want to do with them is find some of those more like ruffed necks that the ravens have. I have some ideas. I mean, I'm not done. I've just made my first few, but this is definitely the start of a new body of work for me, I think. I don't know if you have my other slide of another raven, Adine. I'm not sure what you have. Yeah, so this was actually the first raven I made, but he got fired just because he took longer to dry. He got fired after that other one. Another big influence for me was actually, Rose, I'm right now. Sorry, my daughter's trying to crack ice out of our ice cube tray.
Oh,
Sorry, you hear lumps and bumps in the background. So this raven kind of is based on the idea of Charles Dickens's pet raven Grip. I don't know if anyone ever heard that Charles Dickens actually had a pet raven. His raven actually inspired Edgar Allan Poe to write the poem Raven. So I don't know, I've just been kind of immersed in this raven crow theme. And oh, there's another view of him. Crows are actually, I found out, in many cultures, a symbol of change and transformation, which really appealed to me. This one, just in terms of materials, I experimented with, there's a very shiny black glaze called Peter's Black available at Harvard Ceramics. And then the base is, I experimented with a different kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a smoky coppery brown. So this one I experimented with using two tones in the form. But I've had so much fun with these. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this show. I really do believe that hope is a thing with feathers. My little illustration, I don't know if you have a picture of it, but I showed my dad these pictures of these ravens, and he right away, I had never heard this poem before, just recited Robert Frost's poem. I don't know if any of you know it. I don't know if there's time. Am I speaking too long?
No, it's okay.
I could just quickly recite.
But you go ahead, please.
Oh, it's just a very short, really, it's like a one sentence poem by Robert Frost. And for me, it echoes Emily Dickinson's poem, because for Frost, this crow gives him hope for a day. The poem is called Dust of Snow, and it goes, "The way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued."
I love that one. I love
Wonderful.
That. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. So we have Sharon Witham. I know she's here, and I don't know if she wants to speak at all. She is somebody else we've gotten to know through the, at the BGA through the years. And it turns out that a number of her pieces have also included featured birds. And she is a printmaker. And I don't know if she wanted to speak. We do. I think we have a couple of her slides ready, correct, Adine?
We do.
Sharon, are you out there? I saw you when you came into the waiting room. I don't know if she's still here. She may have left. I don't know. So I don't think she's here. She probably stopped in for a time and then. Yeah. So do we want to just briefly just show her pieces, or?
I can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Let me,
again, just for the scope of work in the exhibit, and how people interpreted the theme.
Let me see if hers is at the end. We get to see everything. This is Sharon.
Yeah, this is nice. We get to see a bunch of, okay. So this is one of Sharon's pieces. And I think there was a second, I thought I saw a second slide, but anyway, I wish that she were here to speak.
I just changed it to the other nest. And then also,
So she's not here, but again, you can see how, we actually have 68 artists in the show, and everybody interpreted the theme in a unique way, which has contributed to a very eclectic, unique show. And I would like to open it up for a few minutes to some questions and answers, if people want to ask the artists questions directly or ask me and Nadine anything. And then, towards the end, we have just over 10 minutes left. We're going to finish out with the jazz combo, serenading us with a little bit, more of those jazz standards. So does anybody have any questions to ask of the BGA or the artists who are, the featured artists at this reception this evening.
Hi, it's Joanna. I just wanted to give a shout out to Glenn. Like, it was your heron picture and that grackle picture. They were so beautiful to me. And I agree that when you said that many people thought your heron picture at first was a painting, I wanted to ask, have you been influenced at all by Japanese woodblock prints or sumi ink prints? Because I felt that type of composition in your photos, and that's something that's influenced me. I'm looking at those as I make my sculptures. I'm just curious if that's something you look at.
Well, thank you. I can't say that I was influenced by it, but I did see that later when I saw the finished image. I felt that way as well. It felt like a Japanese block print or something along those lines. And every once in a while that happens, but it's not because I'm trying to get that effect. So I would be remiss to say that I'm influenced by it.
It's probably because you like that, those artists, I mean, some of them date back to the 1600s and things. They were having an immediate response to nature, and you're having an immediate response to nature. And it's, the compositions almost happen maybe naturally with the birds on twigs and the way it comes into the composition. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, you could shoot nothing but great blue herons and just have a wonderful experience, because they're such amazing creatures and so majestic. So, I literally have thousands of pictures of great blue herons in very different settings where it doesn't look like a Japanese print at all. So it's just, it's one of my favorite birds.
I wanted to just say thank you all and apologize I was late. I'm one of the artists and I'm just so happy I could be here. I had to give a presentation.
Jay, tell us who you are. I mean, I know who you are, but tell.
Jay Gillies is my name, and I have some collages in here. I have 3 pieces and I'm just very happy to be here, and I wanted to just introduce myself as part of this wonderful effort that you've made, and I've continued to exhibit, and you've really, through COVID and everything, gave me a great sense of sharing and process and just being a part of something. So I wanted to speak up.
You're welcome. And how is your hand?
Wonderful.
Oh, it's going to be a long time, but hey, I'm waving, and I won't let you look too closely.
Okay.
And I didn't share the art I'd done about it. So we just don't.
Oh, that'll be for a future exhibit, maybe.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
All
But
right.
I wanted to just keep my humor, let everyone speak they're supposed to. And I'm a big bird fan. And I've been working on an offering project where I've made many, many bird collages and sent them to all sorts of people for 3 years, every day.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And birds have been part of it. So I feel like you're part of my birds this fall.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I actually, I had a question for Becky. Are you still here, Becky?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, Nadine and I, when we were talking earlier today, going over some, some final things for the evening, I wondered, I mean, I love so many of your photographs, and I was wondering, I think, like Glenn spoke to this as well. It's like, how many images are you actually shooting with your camera before you like, oh, this is the one? And you, like you said, you've gotten to know their personalities and sort of their little, their habits and so on. And I was wondering, are you like the ones that are like, in your yard, are you sitting there literally for like hours waiting for something that is just like Glenn said, the money shot, or one of the things about your bird photographs that I've always enjoyed is I really feel like you can sense their personalities, when you're looking at these images of them. And so again, is it something like you're waiting for, hours, or you're in your kitchen and all of a sudden you look out the window and you see something and you get your camera and rush out there,
Well, it's a variety, and my yield depends on, when the Oriole came and I did see it out the window, I was shooting. It was just like I had so many shots that were no good because they just never come. And so I was overwhelmed, and that was it. And I just took whatever I could, and then I worked with them when I finished. I picked out the ones that I liked. But sometimes, I see things so frequently because I do feed them a lot. they come around, and so I can take my time. It's not as if you're working with film where you have to be really, really careful, but I can take my time and wait. Some of those, like where the Downy is poking his head up, and that's basically just a photograph. I haven't played with that much at all. But I mean, I just watched him for a long, long time, and then he did something worth photographing. So I probably don't have a whole series of those. So it depends. But yeah, once in a while, I mean, I had cedar waxwings come, and they were here for maybe half an hour, and I shot.
Yeah, right.
Full of things.
Right.
And looking, like Glenn said, wait for the money shot, the one that worked. They're a bunch out of focus, or they turn their head at the wrong moment, and you're just so excited that they're there that you're shooting all over the place. So it's a mix. And then once in a while, I actually, that's how much I like playing with Photoshop. Like, I'll take an image that actually, in and of itself, it isn't that good, and maybe I've even taken some things that I would consider better, but I'll say, like, work with this, like, make something out of this, make it the best it can be. It's sort of what I used to do with my kids when they were really, really little, and we go to a restaurant, and the ones that had the paper placemats.
Oh, yes.
And I would draw a squiggle, and I'd say, make this into something. And, and they had to use their creativity and come up with something. And once in a while, I will do that with my shots. And sometimes I end up really liking them. I mean, it stretches me. I have to think, how can I make this be something interesting?
I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things I was wondering, is if any of you actually put food out for specific birds. I live in Georgia, and the cedar waxwing is one of the 2 birds out of all the birds that we saw here that I've never seen here. I have blue herons in my backyard.
Oh, wow.
And woodpeckers and cardinals and robins, and it's I just, there's tons of every bird that ever leaves Massachusetts comes through Georgia on its way to Florida, or just stops here for the winter. So quick questions for them.
Janice, would you like to ask a quick question?
I had wondered if anybody fed for specific birds.
I had a comment for Glenn. I love your work. It's stunning. And I had the experience one time of walking through a rookery in St. Augustine, Florida, with all the birds, ibises and roseate spoonbills and egrets and herons with their young, who are just about big enough to fledge the nests in the trees, and all the alligators wall to wall below on the ground. It was like a life-changing experience to walk through this rookery area. That was amazing. And I had a quick question for Julia. I was wondering, what size do you work on your pastels?
So the ones in the show are 9 by 12 inches, and it can be anything from that to 3 times bigger than that.
Thank you.
And I just quickly wanted to say thank you so much for Rebecca and Nadine and all the participating artists. It's a beautiful show, and there's so much art, different forms of art, and different emotions you feel when you go through the show. So
thank you very much.
So much.
Well, the shows wouldn't happen without the artists, so thank you very much. One
Michelle,
more question, right?
Barry actually had quickly because we have the musicians waiting. So Michelle, quickly, will you just say your bit?
Am I on mute or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, we can hear
Hi.
you, Michelle.
I just wanted to say how honored I am to be a part of the show. This is my first time with the BGA. And to answer the question about specific things to feed, I do buy dehydrated, I'm not quite sure what kind of worms they are. They're kind of little brown tannish worms that have like little ringlets segments, and that they are a
Yes,
favorite of
nice.
the
That's-
Bluebirds. So,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to thank also the AANE Artists Collaborative, who let me know about the call for art, and specifically Anastasia O'Melveny, who helped me to understand what is needed in order to submit my work and everything. So I'm very honored and humbled to be in the same show with some of these really fantastic artists.
Dean and I, we want to thank everybody, and we want to let the artists know that we're going to be putting out another call later in the summer. This show is basically up for most of the summer. So encourage your family, friends, colleagues to visit this incredible exhibit. Thank you all for being a part. And Dari is going to come on, and then we're going to have our jazz combo kind of serenade us away.
So I don't want to cut into the music, so maybe I can email you my comment or whatever, and you can do a follow-up.
You have a minute.
So I appreciate very much Becky's Photoshop, spot healing brush and all that. And I'm passionate about the decline in bird population that has been published in the last couple of years. And if anyone, I'm doing a portrait series very slowly of North American songbirds and donating the proceeds of sales to the bird organizations. But anybody that would like to share with me reference photos. I love great blue herons, for example, hint, hint. Anyone who wants to share photos with me to do watercolors, you can look at my work in the show. But I love Becky's work and how she's done things with Photoshop. And it's a great medium, and it should not be discounted. If you take a photo and modify it in Photoshop or Procreate or whatever, it's not a photo, it's a piece of art. And Dean does a lot of that as well. So it's a separate, it's a piece of art, not a photo. So it's a great thing that Becky is doing and other digital artists are doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. I think we've got about 30 seconds, right?
So
we're going to have
go to the VHS band.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. We'll be in touch with everyone. Thank you.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful music. Bravo.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.